reflect on self-value. Self-value is the result of how you see yourself and hold yourself within yourself. It is a function of knowing who you are and what matters to you that grows from a depth of trust and unconditional positive regard for yourself. Self-value grows and deepens when you learn to listen to yourself, your inner dialogue, more than any other external force. It is anchored as you learn to call on your intuition instead of calling your mother for advice. When you can value and hold dear who you are, just as you are, you will know your value. As you move through this day, trust your instincts, listen in, and know that you know better than anyone else what matters and what is right for you.
Again, and welcome to New Beginnings Podcast with Michelle and Beth. This is February. We're at the end of February, coming down to the end because we only have 28 days. Yeah, 28 days in this month. But this is a month of relationships, and we're looking at marriage and different relationships, but more so marriage. And we have had the opportunity to consider communication as a huge factor in relationships, in our marriages. And the last time we also looked at your family of origin, where you come from and what your family background is, whether it's your first, second, third, last, only child with parents, both parents, one parent, guardian, due to death or divorce, as well as looking at how your family of origin affects your current relationship with your partner and even your kids.
Right.
And how we make decisions through this process of understanding our culture, our backgrounds, and what we have done in our lives prior and now in our current situation of relationships. Today, we are going to kind of put it all together. How now our family, our current family, how we can create a healthy relationship amongst each other in our family unit. We have to preface this with the concept of the things that we are talking about is for a healthy family relationship. So if you're in an abusive relationship, these things that we're considering, these tips that we're considering are not going to work. We have to first find help.
Right.
So we want to get a counselor. We want to get, if you want to go to your pastor and you both in the same church, that's one thing.
Right.
Or you find a counselor in your city, state.
Right.
And be able to sit with this counselor, both of you, to get help. Now, I ain't no counselor. She's a counselor. But after talking with Beth, I do understand that we have to, if you want to have a good family relationship, you both have to be counseled together.
Right.
It doesn't work too well.
And I would suggest a licensed counselor.
A licensed counselor.
Or your pastor is fine, but just a licensed counselor, because there are a lot of people out there that might profess to be counselors, but a licensed counselor has been trained.
Yes. Okay. So this is, again, New Beginnings podcast, and this is a new beginning, all right? So it's a way of thinking, a way of being able to help your situation, in your family situation. Okay, so the three things that Beth, you consider important for a healthy relationship? What are the 3 things that we're considering?
And one of the biggest ones is trust.
Yes.
And then with that, trust would be necessary for both husband and wife. Also, the intimacy is a big one that we were looking at because you have to trust the person. The intimacy is a connection, a bond that you have with each other. And then we are also looking at commitment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the commitment itself. So we'll get to the commitment, but actually the trust is the biggest one in my mind. With the communication, you have to be able to trust that person. And when someone has broken our trust, it's very hard to build that back up. So in order to build that back up, you may need some assistance to help build that back up. And that would be some of that counseling coming in.
Right.
But in a healthy marriage, if you do trust that person and you know that they're not going to hurt you, you're going to be willing to communicate more with them also.
Right.
And so you're going to be willing to go to them, ask them how they're feeling, or ask them questions.
Right.
They're going to be able to tell you how they're feeling and ask you questions because you have that underlying connection and trust.
Yes. But, we have to remember also, because this keeps hitting me in my head, you have to still remember that individual's
background
family
and
background.
history, their family of origin, because if they have not been able to trust in that family of origin, or they've had struggles with it, they're going to have a hard time trusting in the relationship.
Right.
Because they're not going to know if you're going to do them harm.
Right.
And so if they think you will, then they're not going to be fully trusting you.
Correct.
So it's being open, honest, caring about that person, making sure they see that you're open and honest, no lying, no, even if it's going to be hard.
Yes.
There's no lying. It's just, and I know we've talked about the different ways of communication style.
Yes.
It might be that you're not lying in what you're saying, but it's very confusing to you because he has a different interpretation of it.
Right.
So that's where you have to talk to each other. That has to come out. And so
we can't put it on the back burner because you really have to figure out exactly what it is your partner is saying to you.
Exactly.
So that you can...
And the more you understand that, the more you're going to trust each other. You're going to completely build that. And you want to be able to trust to feel like they have your back. And so if something goes wrong, let's say you become sick, you want to be able to trust they're going to be there for you.
Right.
And so maybe you've had a family of origin where somebody wasn't there for someone that was sick.
Right.
You're going to assume, oh, they're going to leave me or they're going to do this. Not necessarily. It depends on how strong that communication is between the two of you.
Right.
And holding it together.
Yeah, so trust is a big thing.
Yes, it is. And it's hard. It's very difficult for people to trust.
Yes.
Because we get hurt so many times in relationships. In all kinds of relationships. Not just a marriage.
Right.
But somebody says they're going to do something and then they don't. Or they say they'll be home at this certain time. I'll be home at 6. Well, they got stuck in traffic and they came home at 6:15. That could set someone off because you told me you'd be home at 6. And so communication now with cell phones is really good because you can let that person know I'm stuck in traffic.
Right.
But prior to that, you didn't have that choice. So it's being where you say you're going to be.
Right.
And doing what you say you're going to do.
Right. And for me to believe you, you have to do that continuously. So it's something that you have to do over and over.
Yeah. It has to be a constant.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And that brings us to the point of intimacy.
Yes.
So for me to trust you, or to become intimate with you, I have to trust you.
Right.
If I don't trust you, I'm sorry.
Right. There's no intimacy.
There's no intimacy.
And intimacy doesn't mean that it has to be sex. It has to be something else. Like you're bonded in a certain way.
Yes.
It means intimacy can be a connection. It can just
Connection.
be any kind of a connection and how deep you take that as to your intimacy. So when it comes to husband and wife, then that leads into sexual activity,
Yes.
interaction. That leads to just hand holding, hugging, and as we talked earlier about how men and women are different,
Yes.
then women need to be built up. And when I say built up, they need that caring, that caressing, that I love you type activity,
Yes.
and not just jump in bed. Men, all they have to do, they just look at the female and, okay, we can go and jump in bed.
Right.
So, but the female is just not there at that point. So once the male understands that, that really helps.
Right.
And so they can do that building up. Building up could be doing the dishes. It could be just caring or
talking or
being in the same room for a while.
Being in the same. That's
And-
it's just being in the same room, because sometimes we may not be all day seeing each other, and you haven't been able to communicate. And the communication does not have to be words, really. It could be just being in the same room.
Right. And there is a book that the 5 love languages, many people have probably heard of, that it really is on communication. You want to be able to communicate to your spouse the way they need to be communicated to.
Right. And
And
not
so-
you, not the way you want them
Because
to be
we
communicated.
typically will communicate the way we want to communicate.
Yes.
Or we feel would be best for us.
Correct.
So
Okay.
that helps too. So that intimacy, and once couples realize, oh, if I do some of this, then they're going to be more interested in being intimate. They're going to be more interested in being around together or with me.
So one of the things we also looked at before was emotional closeness. So that speaks into.
And that would bring on that emotional closeness.
Yes.
And some of that emotional closeness, let's say you're in a big crowd, then your husband's on one side, you're on the other, and you happen to glance over and your eyes meet. That can be an emotional closeness also, just by they're right there. Even though you're separated, they know you're thinking of them.
Right. Yeah.
So you have that connection.
Yeah. So we could also look at this is to have that connection emotionally. It also builds up like the health or the wellness of your emotion for each other.
Yes, it does.
Right?
Because if you are healthy and your spouse is healthy, you want to continue that pattern.
Right.
And so the more you can understand each other, the healthier you become, and the more connected you become.
Right.
So.
And that don't happen in 2 weeks.
No, it does not. It does not.
At least I could see that happening in 2 weeks. That takes some time.
Yes, it does.
Especially when you consider all the things that we were talking about before, like family of origin, cultural background.
Right.
Yeah, it takes time. It's like a cycle. Yeah.
And, I mean, my husband and I, married 38 years, still, we are learning every day.
Yes.
So we may have a routine and a rhythm, but we still, we are learning about each other.
I'm learning about myself even.
Sure.
So as an individual, you will also be learning about yourself and learning, what am I doing with myself? And how much do I even trust my own self to do the things that are required for the relationship?
Yes, so it means valuing yourself also.
Self-value, yes.
And staying with that.
Yep.
And the more you're able to do that, the spouse is going to be able to do that too.
Yes, that's
so
true.
we talked about family systems. If one person is reacting a certain way, the other person has to respond some way. And so then when they respond, hopefully it's more of a healthy response.
Right. So like the dance we were talking about in the last episode.
Exactly.
It's a dance. So hopefully when I put my right foot forward, you put in your left foot back.
Right.
and there's a give and take, a balance that has to happen in the relationship for it to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that goes to commitment then. Because that commitment is very, very important. We make a commitment when we first choose to get married.
Yes.
And that commitment needs to continue to stay there. I'm committed to help you through whatever is going on for you. If you become ill, if we have children, whatever we choose to do in our life, we need to be committed to each
to
other.
Mm-hmm.
That also draws in that family of origin in the past is still there. They become part of your life.
Because I'm thinking my understanding of what commitment is may not be the same for you.
Right, very much so.
Yeah,
because depending on how you were raised, and if your parents divorced or if your parents were together, then that commitment may be different. You may not see where that commitment is, or you're not as willing to be committed because of your past history. Right.
And that brings us also to the point of in us trying to be committed to each other, we have to allow ourselves to look at the positive.
Yes, staying positive and being positive.
Yes, and looking like the strengths of my partner, not just my strengths, but the strengths of my partner, and kind of play with that.
Focus on those strengths and draw on those strengths rather than draw on the weaknesses, which is so much easier to do.
Yes.
To pull on the weaknesses.
Yeah.
It takes 9 positives to 1 negative to make that change. So if we're self-talk and negative with ourselves or with our partner, well, we've got to have 9 positives to overcome it.
Right. So we are talking about a healthy relationship here.
Yes.
This is not for the person who's
in an abusive relationship. No.
Right.
Because there are other aspects that need to be handled.
Addressed first.
Yes.
Yes. So if it is you're in an abusive relationship, an abusive or unhealthy relationship, you have to get help.
Get help with that. Make sure you get
help first. And then once you see that ability to become a healthy relationship, one can look at trusting in the relationship, because you have to first trust yourself. Right. So you have to work on you. Right. And you have to work on individuals before you even become the one.
Right. Exactly.
And to be able to trust in a family.
Yes.
Right? And to be able to have that emotional connectedness or being able to be close or healthy emotional lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Ooh. Now, and I know we had some books that were there. One of them was Sex Begins in the Kitchen, which is actually a really fun book. And it's about men and women and some of the differences and how you can build that marriage. And that's by Kevin Lehman. Then another one is Why Marriages Succeed or Fail, and that is by John Gottman. And that's more of an intense book, but the Sex Begins in the Marriage is fun. Sheet Music is another one by Kevin Lehman that's good. Okay. So there are several that he has out on marriage. And there are many, many books out there, but you just want to find the book that's going to fit best for you. Yes. And biblically based book, or so that can help you.
Yes. At the end of this talk, you're going to hear something written or spoken word from Ayana Van Sant. I always pronounce her name differently. But she spoke about self-awareness as well as
the self-value and the mindfulness is what she was talking about.
Self-value, mindfulness, and just affirming, or learning about yourself. I'm going to play that for you so we could kind of look at it from, yes, we're looking at relationships, but you have to first start with your relationship as an individual. Right. And you have to understand your relationship as an individual, your relationship to God, and then your relationship to your partner. And really learn how to value your own self. Right. Before you even try valuing somebody else. Because then if you don't value yourself, you don't even trust your own self. Right. So you can't trust somebody else. Right? So we have to figure that out, try to understand that relationships is something that we have to have no matter what. Right. But it has to happen in the beginning. And if you have a good relationship with God, for instance, And that's a whole different topic altogether.
Yes, it is.
But your relationship with God plays a huge role in the relationship you have with others.
Right. It sure does.
Yeah. One of the other texts to wrap up, let me
Mhm.
see if I can find it. We
Mhm.
had another one that
And
I liked.
While you're looking at that, I
Uh-huh.
can add about what you can do to be
Yeah.
help your marriage, and part of that is be adventurous. Do some things together. Don't push the other person to do what you want, but ask them nicely or consider it. Try new things together, but also do those things you first started out when you were first dating, and those things that you enjoyed with that. Be playful, be romantic, be active. There are many, many different ways and many books out there on that, but just keeping it romantic and alive will help.
Yeah. Philippians 2:4. That was one of the other texts that we looked at. Now not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others.
Yes.
So it's a collaboration.
Yes, it is.
It's not just an individual thing. It's a collaboration. We need to work with each other, and do that dance.
Yes. Yes.
You know, it's a balance, and it doesn't mean we're gonna get it right all the time.
No. And we have to learn to forgive. There are lots of different things that we have to do, but these are just portions of what we've talked about so far.
And if we need counseling, go get it.
Right.
We need to. If we need help, let's go get it, and start that process of being able to change, and so that you can have a healthy marriage.
Right. Exactly.
Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Miss Beth.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been fun. I really do hope, guys, you learned from this podcast this month about healthy relationships, and try to implement them. Execute it. If you don't implement it, you hear me talking, you hear Miss Beth talking. Get something out of it and try to implement it in your own relationships. All right? We are so thankful for your listening ear and for your comments. Do have a blessed rest of the month. And my affirmation before, I am willing to change. I am willing and I'm ready to change. I am willing and ready to change my relationship situations.
Okay. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you again. This is New Beginnings Podcast with Michelle and Beth this time. Have a good one.